Last week we talked about the scary God. We're not going to talk about the scary God. We're we're going to go from that extreme to another extreme. I'm hoping today that I'm going to be able to cover three names of God, um, because we're running out of time and there's a lot more names. I won't cover them all, obviously. In the very last class, what I want to do is take all of our names of God, but then look at Jesus' names or how Jesus also had those same characteristics. I think it's going to be kind of a fun tie-in. So obviously we're going to be in the Old Testament again, and we are going to start today with Genesis 16. So I have a question for you, not necessarily a rhetorical question. It's one you can answer if you want. I'm going to ask it two different ways. First way I'm going to ask it is, do you know what it is like to feel like no one sees you? I see a bunch of yeses. Yeah. Anything anybody wants to comment on briefly? Okay. Hold it close to hold it like this. There you go.
This is probably not the kind of thing you were hoping to hear, but I was in one of the things, cosmetic things I like, used to buy at Neiman Marcus, and I went in there one day, not looking my best, and I was standing at the counter, and they just ignored me. And I finally said, "Am I invisible?" And
Oh, good point. Excuse me, Karen. The other way I want to ask it is, do you know what it is like to feel seen? Seen. Yeah. Well, I mean in a positive sense, not an embarrassing sense, but in a positive, like, wow, I really feel like that person saw what I'm going through. Yeah. Um, I'm going to tell a story about Dale as he comes to sit right up here to irritate me. And and he and he's not going to remember this, but I still remember this. Yeah. This happened, well, probably nearly 30 years ago. This is when Courtney was a teenager, and we were, oh goodness, we were really struggling with her. And during this time frame, Dale and I were carpooling, and he would take me to work, and then he would go to work. I guess my car must have been in the shop. So I just remember during this time frame that when we would drive to work, we were just talking about Courtney, Courtney this, Courtney that. What are we going to do? Just back and forth, talking about Courtney. And this one day, I don't even know what I said. Obviously I said something about being sad or mad or disappointed or just don't know what to do. I'll never forget this. We were sitting at a four-way stop, and Dale was driving, and he turned and looked at me, and he put his hand on my knee, and he said, "I'm really sorry. I know this is hard for you." I will never forget that. Because, we had been doing the talk with each other, but it was like, wow, he really saw me. He really saw my pain in that. That really meant a lot. And I think probably as spouses, as partners, we do the talk together, and sometimes we don't stop. If it's a common pain or a common problem, we don't stop and let one feel, and acknowledge that. Anyway, I'll never forget that. I really felt like Dale saw me that day. Yeah, good job that time, Dale. That was 30 years ago. So let's look at Genesis 16. This is going to be a familiar story to us all, but a great one. So God has made his covenant with Abram and has told him, I'm going to, give you multiple descendants, and it hadn't happened yet. So Sarah, bless her heart, sometimes we women just feel like we got to take things in our own hands, don't we? And she did. And she said, okay, the Lord has kept me from producing an heir, so take my maid servant, my hand servant, and bear a child through her. And that was Hagar, was her maidservant. And so Abram agreed to what Sarah said, and Hagar conceived a son. So when Hagar knew she was pregnant, I'm looking about verse 4, she began to despise her mistress. So there must have been obviously some tension there. And if Sarah says to Abram, you're responsible for this thing I'm suffering right now. And so may the Lord judge between you and me. She was being a little dramatic, I think. And so Abram says, whatever, do whatever you got to do. And so Sarah mistreated Hagar, and Hagar ran off. So y'all remember this story? So I'm looking at verse 7. The angel of the Lord, I love how the angel of the Lord pops up in these stories. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going? I am running away from my mistress, Sarah, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her, and added, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now with child, and you will have a son. You will name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all of his brothers. She gave this name to Yahweh, who spoke to her, you are Elohim who sees me. I have now seen the one who sees me. And that is why the well between Beer Lahai Roy is still there. And that well is called the Well of the Living One. So she uses the word, you are Elohim who sees me, the one who sees me. So I want to submit this name of God. El Roi, the God who sees, or who sees me. This is a God who sees us, not just Hagar, but our God is someone who sees us, right? Who sees us when we're in the desert, but not just when we're in the desert, and who knows that we're there. I remember when we lived in Oklahoma City, I worked in women's prison ministry. And for the women in prison who were separated from their kids, young kids, grown kids, and were really worried about what was going on in their lives. And I remember us studying this story about Hagar. They really related to that and found comfort in knowing El Roi. God, God sees their children, even though they can't see children. And I feel like that's should be a lot of comfort to us too. So this is what I want to share as we think about the theological significance of this name. El Roi affirms that God is all seeing and all knowing. Sometimes that kind of strikes a little terror in us, but for the most part, we are glad to know that our God knows and sees what we're going through. He is aware of every detail of his creation, which is why I like El, thinking about Elohim, the mighty creator. And he is aware of the lives of his people. This attribute of God should provide comfort and assurance that nothing escapes his notice. So if we're ever wondering, does God really see what's going on with me right now? Here's our assurance that he does. It also reminds us of God's faithfulness. Now, obviously, Ishmael was not part of God's plan for the descendants, for Abram's descendants. And we know the rest of the story, which Ishmael is basically where the Muslim tradition came from. So that prophecy continues to be true, the prophecy about Ishmael. Being a wild donkey of a man and everybody against him, and he's against everyone. Interestingly, though, the name Ishmael, we're talking about God sees. Ishmael's name means God hears. Isn't that interesting? I just found that. When I was studying for this, found that. I thought that's so ironic. The narrative of Hagar and Ishmael demonstrates God's faithfulness to his promises. Even when circumstances seem dire, God remains true to his word, providing guidance and hope for the future. And then this name, El Roi, reminds us of God's inclusivity. So in this story, Hagar was a slave, basically. She was Egyptian, so she was not part of the Abraham tree that was going to happen. But this highlights God's concern for all people. So God had concern, showed concern for Hagar, who was an Egyptian, not within the purview of his plan that he had with Abram. This highlights God's concern for people regardless of their ethnic or social background. El Roi is not limited to a specific group, but is the God who sees and cares for all humanity. Mike, got a microphone? Oh, JJ. Run, JJ. Cheryl. That's right.
It seems, if I'm going to say this, I should say it now. Excuse me for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
But, in the Muslim tradition, Ishmael is the son of promise, that Abram was asked to sacrifice. They have
Interesting.
a holiday in Indonesia, and I'm sure the other Muslim countries, that is celebrating Abram's being prepared to sacrifice his son.
And in their
Ishmael.
and in their tradition, it was Ishmael, not Isaac.
That's right.
Very interesting. Never knew that.
Again, I don't know if that's worldwide, but I know.
Okay, it was in Indonesia. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. So what does this mean for us? Knowing about El Roi, the God who sees me. Any thoughts? Any comments about that? Hang on, we'll get you in a minute. Get Carrie first, then we'll get Lawrence.
It's a good way of taking care of your kids. I might see you, but God sees you.
True.
You cannot hide.
You cannot hide. Wasn't there a song we used to sing back in the day about the all-seeing eye? The all-seeing eye watching me. Yeah, that's funny. But I don't, the context of what I'm trying to share with El Roi, that we should find comfort in the fact that God sees us. All right. Any thoughts, comments about El Roi? Okay, so I just have to, there's always one little rabbit trail. So after Hagar experienced this with God, and she went back to Sarah to live with Sarah and Abram again. It's not the rest of the story. So later on in Genesis 21, after Isaac was born, then there was another incident where Ishmael was mocking Isaac or mocking Abraham. I'm not sure, can't tell from the way the sentence is written. And so Abram basically sent Hagar off into the desert again. In the early morning, this verse 14, Abram took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar and sent her off, and she and Ishmael went wandering in the desert of Beersheba. And when the water was all gone, she put the boy underneath one of the bushes and walked away and said, I can't watch him die. God heard the boy crying. Okay. Ishmael means God hears. God heard the boy crying. And the angel of God once again shows up and says, what's the matter? Don't be afraid. Take him by the hand, and I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, filled the skin with water, and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. And while he was living in the desert, his mother got him a wife from Egypt. So, even though Hagar had been seen by God, she still struggled. She didn't remember that. Or maybe she did, and she just thought God didn't see anymore. So, as it is with us also, sometimes we forget about these things. Okay, any other thoughts on El Roi? Okay. Yes, Scott.
I don't have my Bible open, so I'm trying to remember, but isn't that also the moment where Hagar called God Jireh because he provided? No. Okay, I'm remembering wrong.
Oh, that's where we're going next. Good segue.
I'm glad my mistake could be your segue.
That's all right. That's all right. No, that's exactly where we're going next. So now we're going to Genesis 22. One moment. Okay.
Before we move past this point, this is probably a minutia that doesn't really matter, but I find this story really interesting that he sees, in Hagar's case, he sees before he's listening from her point. I mean, he's omniscient, so he's seeing and hearing everything.
Mhm.
But from her point of view, being seen comes first and then being heard. I think that's even true with Abraham.
Hmm.
I think that may be true with all of us. Just
That we have to
we
see.
have to know that God sees
Mhm.
before we really understand that He hears also. I'm thinking that, I don't know. Anyway, I just thought it seems relevant to me. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. No, it all stirs up different things in all of us. So no, I'm glad you shared that. Okay, so let's look in. So first of all, El Roi, that passage with Hagar, that's the only place that name is used. So we got a couple of one-hit wonders here that we're going to do today. El Roi is one of them, and the next one is it's not used anywhere else in the Bible. So let's look at Genesis 22. And this is when God says to Isaac, I'm looking at verse 2, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar. And go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey, took some servants, some wood, and he set out for the place God had told him about and took Isaac. On the third day, Isaac looked up and saw the place in the distance. He told the servants, stay here with the donkey while Isaac and I go over there. We will worship, then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac on his back to carry. Then he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. The wood and fire are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord showed up again, called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not only withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns, took it and sacrificed as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. So we've got two versions of this one. Verse 8, Abraham, when Isaac said, where's the lamb? Abraham answered, Elohim Yahweh, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then later, Verse 14, Abraham called that place Yahweh. Yahweh. And so if you've seen this in maybe another book or other things that you've read, you're also going to see it this way. That's how we've Englishized it. The mighty creator, the plural God, will provide. There you go, Scott. It was in the next chapter. I have a friend who is a missionary, and she depends on contributions or money, donations from people to help fund her travels and that sort of thing. And I always hear her say that she's so grateful for God's provision. And I really like that. That has stuck in my mind because I don't know, things happen and we're provided for, and it just, maybe we don't think about it, or we just think, well, I worked hard and did this or whatever, But when we stop and think about it, it's because God has provided for us. And so or she'll say, I know God will provide. I know God's provision has been bountiful in the past. I know God will provide for me in the future. And she seems to me on the outside to not worry at all about it. And I think it's because she's seen God's provisions, has been so aware of God's provision, that she trusts that it will continue. So I'm just wondering if you can think of a time that God provided just what you needed at just the right time. I see some nodding heads. Anybody want to? Florence?
It's redundant, but she's sitting right beside me.
She's sitting right beside you. Yeah. Yes.
This was many moons ago, but it really did one of those things that built my faith. I was still a teenager living at home, and my dad had decided when I was in high school that he was going to go back into preaching. I really had a hard time with that because I was finally in a school long enough to build friendships. Anyway, I ended up going to 3 high schools, which was not the, that's another story. But anyway, there was another place that we were coming into to move to, and it was so nice because these people let us in to live with them. I mean, there's 4 of us kids. Oh my goodness, these are gutsy people allowing this family in, and then getting a preacher on top of that one. Who knows what would go on in that that house. But anyway, I remember how I felt so unsecure because we were like, we had no house. We had no home, place to call home, homeless basically, we're just leaning on somebody else to make this all work. And at that time, the newspaper was out and Dad's looking for houses and stuff. And he just, he was so easy about it. And it's just like, oh, this is going to work out. God's got this. I'm going, huh? How's he got this? And lo and behold, they found a place. Turns out the house that was for rent happened to be owned by a member of a neighboring congregation, And I can go on about how perfect that house was. It was just, I got my own bedroom. And the curtains and the bed, our bedspread matched and everything. I mean, it was just so great. But it was like, to me, it was in my own way, this was a miracle
Mhm.
that how that worked. And it just, that whole thing just sustained me. And then the confidence that my father had that the Lord would, this is going to work out. And
Yeah.
it just worked so much better than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, that's good.
He provided for me the other day. I was in the store and I was blocking the driveway. I mean the walkway, and I had my sunglasses hung up.
Keep the microphone up to your mouth.
I had my sunglasses, got them hung up to my necklace, and I didn't know what to do. And I said, well, I guess I'm gonna have to take this little tiny necklace off. I can't see worth a hoot. And I heard somebody say, somebody needs to get out of the aisle so we can pass. And I thought, yeah, okay. I said, okay. And I started moving out of the way. And she hollered, Mona. I turned around and it was Alicia. And she and see, I was all hung up. I mean, I was hung up. Yes, you were.
God provided Alicia to help you out. That's great. That's great. Just to say a little bit more about this word, Yaira, the root to that word is to see, but it's not the same word as roi in the roi in the Hebrew. And so, but it's a compound word in the Hebrew, which I know nothing about all that, which means to provide. I think the key to God's provision here was Abraham's obedience. I mean, we've got to tie those two things together. Abraham was obedient in a way that I couldn't have been. So I think that's really, really important. And when I read this passage too, I think about how Jesus was obedient too. We're going to talk more about that on our last class. So just a couple of points. The theological significance of this name is God knew that God had a plan. He knew God knows what's going to happen, but all in God's providence, he had this plan. But he still showed Abraham that because of Abraham's faith, he would provide. I think that's really important. This name reflects the understanding that God sees and knows our needs even before they're expressed, and underscores the faithfulness of God in fulfilling his promises to provide in times of need. And then, as I mentioned, this is a foreshadowing for us who see on this side of things a foreshadowing of God's ultimate provision. Which was the provision of the sacrifice of Jesus for our sins. And highlights the continuity of God's redemptive plan through all of scriptures. Okay, so it is 10:45. We're gonna, I'm sorry, 9:45. We'll stop here and I will share this third one next week with hopefully a couple more. Next week will be our last week to talk about the names of God. But then what I want us to do the last Sunday is to, and I'll fix the board. I may have a handout with all the names of God and what they mean. I will. I'll do that. I will. And then I want you to start thinking about now these characteristics of God and then how we see those same characteristics in Jesus. I think that's going to be fun, a fun exercise for us to do that together. So, all right, any other thoughts or comments? Or Mona? I haven't. I mean, I have the one of the books I'm using is 52 Names of God, but that's just for, to fit a weekly devotional. But I have not looked that up. I'll look that up and see if there's an answer to that question. Because there's a lot of different names of God. People call God a whole lot of different things. I mean, you can see in the graphic how many different names there are there, and there's probably even more than that. So I'll see what I can find out on Mona. That's a good question. All right. Thanks, everybody.